I always hated the night shifts, but something about tonight was different. It wasn't just the isolation, it was too quiet. The fluorescent lights flickered above me, casting eerie shadows across the aisles of Walmart. I grabbed a card and began to wander, hoping the routine would calm my nerves. The empty store felt like an endless maze. It was 2:30 a.m. when I found myself standing in front of the canned goods aisle, staring at rows upon rows of soup cans. I knew the store was open 24 hours, but I had never seen it this empty before. I was alone, or so I thought. A sudden movement caught my eye. Far down the aisle, a figure, a woman, stood there, her back turned to me, facing the shelves. The silence hung between us like a fog, the distance between us growing heavier with each passing second. I couldn't make out her face, but something about her posture seemed wrong. Her shoulders were too rigid, too still. I shook my head, dismissing it as the exhaustion starting to take over, but as I took a step forward, the lights flickered again. In that brief moment of darkness, she disappeared. I felt my heartbeat pick up. I told myself to keep moving. This was ridiculous. It was just the night shift playing tricks on me. But when I passed the aisle where she had been, I noticed something strange. A large section of the shelf had been knocked over, cans scattered across the floor in a perfect line, as if someone had been dragged across the aisle. I froze, my breath caught in my chest. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I quickly moved past the mess and back into the main aisle, trying to shake the feeling that I was being watched. The store was so quiet it was suffocating. The lights overhead buzzed incessantly, almost like a warning. I moved past the electronics section, hoping to lose myself in the rows of TVs, but something was off. The air felt colder, sharper. I glanced up at the display screens. Something was wrong with them. They were all stuck on the same channel, a static-filled image of the front doors. I turned quickly, thinking I must be imagining it, but that's when I heard it. A faint whisper, so soft I almost didn't catch it. "Help me." I froze. My stomach dropped. The whisper didn't come from anywhere I could see, but it felt close. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling, but my words echoed off the walls, swallowed by the endless expanse of aisles. No response. My feet carried me forward against my will, drawn to the back of the store. The more I tried to ignore it, the louder the whisper became, until it sounded almost like crying. It was coming from the customer service area, where the lights were dim and flickering erratically. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my breath shallow. What if it was a customer in distress? The thought felt normal enough. But then I remembered the store was practically empty. There hadn't been anyone else in here since the shift started. I took a step forward, my heart pounding. I walked past the self-checkout lanes, moving deeper into the darkened section. That's when I saw it. The woman again, standing just behind the customer service desk. Her back was to me, but now I could see her reflection in the glass window. But her reflection didn't match her movements. It didn't even look like her. The figure in the window grinned, no, smiled at me, a grin far too wide, stretching across her face like a jagged scar. I blinked, and in the next instant, she was gone. I ran toward the exit, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling, the cold creeping into my bones. The store felt like it was swallowing me whole, its endless aisles stretching out in front of me, twisting in ways they shouldn't. Every step I took felt like I was sinking deeper into something I couldn't understand. I reached the front doors, locked. Why were the doors locked? I was sure they had been open when I first entered. I pounded on the glass, but no one answered. I looked around, my eyes darting to the security cameras, but they too were frozen, static on the screens, showing nothing but empty aisles. And then, behind me, I heard it again, that whisper. But this time, it wasn't in the distance. It was in my ear, right behind me. I turned quickly, but no one was there. I knew something was wrong. This wasn't just a trick of the night shift. This was something else. Then I heard the shuffling of footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate. I whipped around again, but no one was there. The lights flickered once more, and this time I saw something else. A figure standing at the far end of the store, near the aisles where the cleaning supplies were. Her head was tilted, just like before, and now I realized the woman was never a shopper at all. She was the thing that had been hunting me. I ran. I didn't look back. I couldn't. But as I neared the front door, I heard one last thing. Her voice, clear and chilling in the silence. "You're never leaving." It was just another late shift at Walmart, the hum of the lights above, the buzz of the air conditioning keeping the store cold and sterile. I had always found something comforting about working these hours. Just me, the aisles, and the occasional customer who was in a rush. Most people don't know what it's like to close down a big store alone. There's a strange peace to it. Until tonight. The clock struck 11:30 p.m. and the last customer had left. The door chimes still echoing in my ears. As I walked through the aisles, restocking here and there, I felt the weight of the stillness settle over me. The back office was locked, and I had just started my closing routine when I noticed something strange. A door at the far end of the store. I'd walked past it dozens of times before, but tonight I couldn't shake the feeling that it was different. It was tucked behind a stack of boxes in the far corner of the back storage room, a door that didn't fit with the rest of the store. It had no sign, no indicator of its purpose, just a steel door, locked with an old rusted padlock. I walked closer, the cold air from the storage room biting at my skin. My curiosity got the best of me, and I stood there for a moment staring at the door. Something about it felt off. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. This was never meant to be part of the store. It was too out of place. Why had I never noticed it before? I reached for the padlock, my fingers trembling slightly. I didn't know what I was expecting to find. Maybe an old cleaning closet, maybe a forgotten stock room. But something told me it was more than that. I stood there, unsure of what to do, when I heard a sound, a faint scraping, followed by a click. I turned around, but no one was there. My pulse quickened. The sound had come from behind the door, though I was certain no one else was in the store. The silence grew oppressive as I stared at the locked door. It couldn't be just an ordinary closet. The strange noise had been too deliberate, too unsettling. I walked closer to the door, pressing my ear against the cold metal. There was a faint hum, a soft vibration that felt wrong, as if the door were alive. My heart pounded in my chest. Maybe I'm just hearing things, I muttered to myself, trying to shake the nervous feelings settling in my stomach, but I couldn't ignore it. The strange hum, the scraping sound, and the unexplainable pull to investigate. Something told me that door had been there for a reason, and maybe, just maybe, tonight was the night it would be uncovered. I paced the room, my fingers running over the edge of the padlock. The noise stopped suddenly, as if waiting for me to make the first move. I was about to turn around and go back to work when I saw it. A shadow, flickering across the aisle from the corner of my eye. I whipped around, but there was nothing. Just the empty aisles, the cold flickering lights above. It was like something had just crossed my path, but it didn't belong. The door. I walked back toward it, hesitation creeping into my mind. Maybe I was losing it, but I had to know. I couldn't let this go. I needed to see what was on the other side. Slowly, I reached for the lock again, and with a soft twist, it opened. The door creaked open, the sound echoing in the dead silence of the store. My flashlight illuminated the narrow hallway beyond the door. A hallway that shouldn't have existed. The space was darker than I had expected, cold and unwelcoming, with walls that looked as though they had been forgotten by time. I stepped inside, the air thick with dust, my footsteps muffled against the old, cracked tiles. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment I thought I saw something. Movement at the end of the hallway. I froze. A figure. It was tall, almost towering, standing just past the end of the hall, its back to me, my breath caught in my throat. "Hello?" My voice cracked. the sound weak in the still air, but the figure didn't move, didn't acknowledge me. It was like it was waiting. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. Slowly, I took a step forward, every instinct screaming at me to turn around, to leave. But curiosity had already sunk its claws into me, dragging me forward. I couldn't turn back now, not after everything I had already seen. I took another step, and the figure turned. My blood ran cold. The face I saw was not human. It was pale, smooth, and featureless, like a mask of something that never quite fit. And its eyes, dark, empty voids that seemed to stare through me rather than at me. It opened its mouth, but no sound came out, just a faint whisper that seemed to crawl under my skin, making my heart race faster. I turned to run, but found myself rooted to the spot, my legs unable to move, the air suffocating. The thing in front of me, whatever it was, smiled. It was a grin that stretched unnaturally wide, as if it knew something I didn't. And that's when I realized the room, the hallway, the figure, none of it was supposed to be here. This was not part of Walmart. Whatever was behind that door was something not meant to be discovered. The walls began to shift. I felt the temperature drop. The floor beneath me seemed to warp, twisting into something otherworldly. I could hear the thing now, whispering, its voice crawling into my mind. You shouldn't have come. I turned and fled, the door slamming shut behind me with a deafening thud. I didn't look back as I ran to the front of the store, my chest tightening with every step. When I finally burst through the front doors, gasping for air, I turned to look at the store one last time. The lights flickered and dimmed, and I could swear I saw something moving in the window, a figure in the reflection, staring back at me. But when I blinked, it was gone. I never returned to that Walmart. I couldn't, but I couldn't escape the feeling either, that something is still behind that locked door, waiting, watching. And sometimes in the dead of night, I still hear the whisper, so faint, so cold, you shouldn't have opened the door. It was already 11:45 p.m., and the store was eerily quiet. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me as I wiped down the counter, my usual late-night routine. I worked the overnight shift at a small, run-down convenience store just off the highway. Most nights it's just me, a few stragglers grabbing snacks or gas, and then silence. Tonight felt no different, and I was ready to head home in just 15 minutes. But then I saw her, just outside the door. She was standing by the entrance, her silhouette barely visible through the glass doors. I didn't recognize her. I'd been working this shift for months, and I'd seen most of the regulars, but this woman, she didn't belong. She was dressed in a long, dark coat, even though it wasn't that cold out. Her hair was tied back in a tight bun, and she held a large, worn leather purse close to her side. There was something unsettling about the way she stood there, almost waiting for something or someone. It felt like she was studying the store from the outside. I turned away for a moment, finishing the last few tasks on my list, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease. But when I glanced up again, she was already inside. The door chimes jingled softly as she entered, and I jumped, startled by how quietly she moved. "Good evening," I said, forcing a smile. She didn't immediately respond. Instead, she just stood there for a moment, her eyes scanning the aisles, looking for something. I tried not to stare, but something about her felt wrong. It wasn't just her appearance. It was the way she moved, almost too smoothly, like she was gliding rather than walking. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, my voice a little shakier than I wanted it to be. She finally looked at me, her expression unreadable. Her eyes were pale, almost translucent, and for a second I swore I saw something flicker in them. But before I could say anything, she turned toward the back of the store, silently drifting past the aisles. I couldn't explain it, but something about her presence felt off, unnatural even. I went back to my work, trying to shake off the discomfort, but every so often I'd glance over at her, watching her wander the aisles, picking up items only to put them back without a word. The clock ticked closer to midnight, and I began to wonder if she was going to leave soon. Then I heard her voice, soft, almost a whisper. "Where is it?" I froze at the sound of her voice. "Where is it?" she repeated, but this time it was louder, more demanding. My heart started racing. I looked up from behind the counter, trying to spot her, but she was nowhere in sight. I stood still, trying to calm my nerves, wondering if I had just imagined the whole thing, but then I heard it again, coming from the farthest aisle. "Where is it?" Her voice was almost a growl. I quickly grabbed the store's flashlight and cautiously walked toward the sound. As I passed the rows of snacks and cleaning supplies, the air seemed to grow colder. It didn't make sense. There was no air conditioning in this part of the store, but the chill felt like it was coming from the woman herself. I could see her now, standing in the back corner, staring at an empty shelf. Her body was still, but her head was turned slightly to the side, as if she were listening to something, or waiting for an answer. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice shaking as I approached. She didn't acknowledge me at first. Then, without turning around, she spoke again, but this time the words felt different, urgent, almost frantic. "I need it," she said, her voice low, nearly lost in the darkness of the store. "It's here, I know it's here." I felt a knot form in my stomach. This wasn't normal behavior. She was acting like someone who had been searching for something for days, weeks, or even months. But what was she looking for? The way she was talking, it was as if the store had something hidden, something important, something only she knew about. I took another step closer, but she suddenly spun around, her eyes wide and wide with fear. Her pupils were dilated, almost animalistic. She looked at me as if I were the one who had been stalking her. Her lips parted in a slow, deliberate motion. "It's coming," she whispered, before taking off toward the back door of the store. I stood there, completely frozen, not sure what I had just witnessed. I could hear the door slam open as she fled into the night, but something told me she wasn't done yet. Something told me she had left something behind, something she was coming back for. My hands were shaking, and I wasn't sure what to do next. I glanced around the store, trying to make sense of this strange behavior, but before I could take another step, I heard a noise, a scraping sound, followed by a low hum like something was moving in the back storage area. I took a deep breath and moved toward the storage area, every step feeling heavier than the last. The scraping sound continued, growing louder with each passing second. My flashlight's beam flickered as I approached the door, and for a moment I stood there, wondering if I should turn around and lock myself in the back office. But something inside me told me I had to know what was going on. The storage room was dark, the only light coming from the small flashlight I held in my hand. I reached for the door handle and slowly pushed it open. The sound stopped abruptly. I stepped inside, the air thick with the musty scent of old cardboard boxes and cleaning supplies. It was empty, almost too empty. There were no shelves lined with inventory, no crates or cans stacked against the walls. Just one thing, a large black tarp in the center of the room. I felt a chill run down my spine as I approached the tarp. My fingers brushed against it, and I pulled it back slowly, expecting to find some kind of equipment or maybe discarded items. But instead, my heart stopped in my chest. There, lying motionless on the floor, was the woman. But she wasn't the same as before. Her coat was now torn, and her eyes were wide open, staring up at the ceiling, lifeless. I stepped back, my stomach turning as I tried to process what I was seeing. This couldn't be happening. She was just here. I had just spoken to her. And then I saw it. The object she had been searching for. It was a small silver pendant lying next to her body, half covered by the tarp. It was shining in the dim light, almost as if it had a life of its own. My hands trembled as I bent down to pick it up, feeling the weight of it in my palm. The cold metal sent a jolt through my body, and for the first time, I felt truly afraid. Suddenly, the room seemed to shift. The shadows in the corners stretched and pulled at me, as if they were trying to close in. I glanced at the pendant again, and it was glowing faintly, almost imperceptibly, as if something was awakening within it. The scraping sound started again, louder this time, but this time it wasn't coming from the storage area. It was coming from outside the store, from the direction of the highway. I ran back toward the front door, but when I looked outside, there was nothing. No car, no person, just the empty, desolate highway stretching into the darkness. But I knew I wasn't alone. I could feel eyes on me. And that pendant, whatever it was, it had drawn something to this place. Something far more terrifying than I had imagined. As the clock struck midnight, I heard the door chime again, softly. A shadow stood outside, just beyond the glass, watching. I didn't need to look twice to know that the night wasn't over. The last customer hadn't left yet.